Hey, listeners, we just wanted to let you know about something new and cool we're trying.
No, it's not a new plant, but almost as good. It's our first webinar. The topic is the best low maintenance shrubs for your garden.
Yes, on Thursday, October 22nd at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can hear us go back and forth about our favorite low maintenance shrubs.
As usual, we'll finish up with an expert. This time we're going to have world-renowned woody plant expert Paul Cappiello of the Udell Gardens in Kentucky.
Even cooler is that we will host a Q&A session afterwards where you can ask questions like, Steve, why are all your plants so awesome? And Danielle, aren't Steve's plants so awesome?
We'll be answering questions from actual sane people as well.
And it's free.
Go to finegardening.com today to sign up.
That's the best low maintenance shrubs for your garden, Thursday, October 22nd, 7 p.m.
See you there.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Argue About Plants, the podcast for people who love plants.
Just not always the same ones.
I'm Steve Aiken.
I'm Danielle Sherry. We're both from Fine Gardening Magazine. And today's episode brought to you, sponsored by fall. Even though it's not fall yet for us. We're getting dangerously close to the fall season, though.
Labor Day is in a few days, so
I know
I think we're in the spirit.
You know, we're pulling back the curtain here, so people now know that we record these quite far in advance. So by the time this comes out, it will definitely be fall. And our topic today is fall blooming plants. Hooray!
Well, at least we're not recording the Christmas episode now.
Well, no, you wouldn't know that because I'd have my jingle bells that you love so much out, and I'd be jingling them every 2 seconds just to annoy you.
So what's the topic?
So it's fall blooming plants or fall bloomers, which reminds me of, medieval undergarments, but fall blooming plants.
Okay. That's great.
I can tell you're super excited about it, Steve.
Well, no, I am. I like fall is my favorite season. So anything having to do with fall is great. I like cool wind, blowing in my hair. I like even temperatures. I like rainy days. The thing about spring is that it's usually kind of like cold is the base, and then you get like a little warmth thrown in. With fall, like it's warm, and you get a little coolness, thrown in. That's why I like fall.
And it's generally drier. Spring is cold and damp, I always feel like. And then fall is you get some warm days, cool nights, a little bit drier, hopefully zero humidity.
Well, it's dry usually from coming out of summer, but the rains return. And so so it's safe to garden again. Like if I try to garden in summer, then I'm going to have to baby, any of the plants that I just planted or divided or moved or whatever. And I don't want to do that. Like to me, it's safe in fall because rain might happen. The temperature is a little cooler. The plants aren't going to be that stressed as if I did something in summer.
Yeah.
And I just like fall because then you also have the excuse of not doing something because there's a football game on that you have to watch. So it's just a great time all around. And I like the idea that things pick up again. So I like a good fall bloomer. So it's not just everything finished, back in June, and then we're just waiting for the end. Things pick back up again, and I like the colors of fall. I like everything about fall. So plants that bloom in fall, I love.
Well, I think it's also interesting because, we have a unique perspective. We're in New England. We're known for our fall color. But when people talk about fall color, they mean generally our woody plants, trees and shrubs that, get a really nice color transition to their foliage. Very seldom do you hear people talk about, these are amazing plants that actually bloom in fall. We're not getting the color from the foliage transition. We're getting the color from flowers, which is a little bit rarer, a little more unexpected.
Yeah, and for a long time in my gardening life, I was sort of anti fall bloomers because
Why?
I would always say like, why do I want to sit there and look at that plant for most of the season just to maybe have it do its thing, at the very end of the season? Because at least a lot of the ones on my list really aren't that impressive as foliage plants, and they kind of look kind of
Yeah, mine either.
like a little coarse, and so they're better planted behind something. So I'm like, well, why put in all that effort? But
Mhm.
then when fall rolls around and you actually see them, then you know why. I mean, it took a lot of visits to a lot of gardens over the years to be like, oh, I really should plant some of those. I really
Mhm.
wouldn't it be great if I actually had something going on in fall? And so I broke down and just chucked a few things in and then would forget about them and they would bloom and it would make me happy. And so I started incorporating more. Um, yeah.
Fall
So
bloomers, yeah. Well, so
yeah.
that's interesting because my first plant is something that doesn't look great through most of the season, but it's where I site it is what makes it okay, I feel like, in my garden. So I'm talking about Tatarian aster, and this is a ginormous aster. Asters for fall aren't anything novel or exciting generally. Those are the typical fall bloomers, I feel like, other than mums that you think
Wait,
about.
time out.
Um,
What did you just say about asters?
yeah. they're a little typical. They're a little typical.
Hmm.
You don't think so? I think that
Well,
they
well,
are.
well, sure, but that's because they're great. I mean,
Well,
they're awesome. I've got one coming up too. But yeah,
well,
you can't diss asters because it's their time to shine.
yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm just a little biased against asters because I've worked for so many years in the garden center, and it's like fall rolls around, and what do you get? 8 million mums and 8 million asters and ornamental kale. That's basically your jam for
Yeah,
all of September, all of October. And you're gonna have to forgive me because yeah, I have PTSD from those days.
but
But this is
those asters you get in are those are not the good asters.
those are not the good asters.
I
Yeah.
was going to call them something. We're not allowed to swear on this, but I was going to call them the blanking asters.
Yeah.
But and like mums, like there are great mums out there, but the garbage you get at in fall are just the cheapo ones, but there's some
Yeah.
really good perennial ones, and I was going to recommend some of those, but I did not. They did not make the list. But anyway, don't think of asters as what you see at the supermarket
Yes.
in fall or the mass produced things. There are a ton of great species and cultivars that are just wonderful garden plants on their own, one of which is the one that I'm going to let Danielle return to talking about.
So this is Tartarian aster. It's Aster tartaricus. Jindai is the cultivar name. Jindia. And this is zones four.
DAI.
DAI. That's what I said, right?
Yeah. No, you said D. I don't know.
D.
I,
Roll
it's
back the tape. Roll
well,
back the tape.
it's been like 10 or 15 minutes since I've corrected somebody, so I just have to make something up to
Jindai,
right.
Jindai. So this is zones 4 to 8. And when I first moved and I started, creating new gardens at our then new house, now almost a decade ago, this was given to me by a friend. There was a chunk of this from my friend Jen, and she's like, "Hey, wherever you put this, just make sure you don't care if it takes over." So I actually followed some advice someone gave me, not you, Steve, and I planted this as an underplanting to a bank of oak leaf hydrangeas that I have. And, for most of the year, it looks like romaine lettuce. I feel like that is a spot on description of what the foliage of this plant looks like. It's just spears of romaine lettuce all over the place. And it kind of spreads out rather, let's see, I don't want to say thuggishly, but it spreads out very nicely and becomes kind of an understory and ground cover. And then mid to late fall for us here in the Northeast, it sends up these bottle rockets of thick stems and gets almost panicle shaped blossoms that are comprised of all these teeny tiny lavender daisy like flowers. They're purple, they've got a yellow center to them, and it's an explosion. And I really like where I planted it, because as the oak leaf hydrangea, the blooms have kind of faded, they're going to kind of a rusty color. This guy shoots up through the oak leaf hydrangea because it gets 4 to 6 feet tall when it blooms. It's a big guy. And it looks like the oak leaf hydrangea is back in bloom again, which is really, really cool. It's an optical illusion. And this is for full sun to part shade. And again, you want to put it someplace where you don't mind it getting a little beefy, because it does tend to fill in. It's not aggressive. It won't choke out other plants, but it definitely does spread. So be wary of that. I love it so much. And yeah, that's Tatarian aster, not your typical aster.
When I saw that one on your list, you remember this? I was checking the spelling of it.
Yeah.
Because we pronounce it Tatarian aster, but there's no R in there.
No.
Like it's Tatar. And so anybody who's Googling that, I don't want you to Google the wrong plant. Or just do the wrong spelling, but it's Tatarian aster tataricus,
yeah.
Which always throws me off. But I like what you said about where it's planted, because that's such a key with success for plants. Is it could be a great plant, but it's just in the wrong place. Not only for it to thrive, but for it to look good, and for it to do its thing. So that's right plant, right place has more to do than just cultural thing. There's more to it than that. And since we're talking about asters, I'll move ahead to my aster, which I was going to do later. Not that the order matters, but
it's our show. We get to do what we want,
right? But mine is placed in an area where it should look good, and I'll get this to this later. And now that it's time for me to name this aster, I immediately regret having chosen it. It's Andekin and Alma Potchki, New England aster. So its botanical name is Symphyotrichum novae Angliae, Andekin and Alma Potchki. and so because that's such a mouthful, you usually just see it. People just call it Alma Potchki.
Alma Potchki, yeah.
Right, and that's spelled ALMA POTSCHKE with an umlaut over the O. So it's already a little complicated, even without the Andenkin and Alma Potchki. And I think if we turn to our European bureau correspondent Leo, he would tell us that in German this means in memory of Alma Potchki. Because the Potchki nursery apparently was a big thing in Germany, and they have a lot of plants that are named after various members of the family. And this one is in memory of Alma Potchki.
I was just thinking that's a really good name of like a great aunt, Aunt Alma.
Right,
Aunt Alma. She made some great pierogies.
And it's not a name that is used anymore. It's like one of those names that's got like there are no girls in my daughter's high school class that are named Alma. I think they're worse off for that. I think there should be an Alma.
There should be. Let's bring it back.
Yeah. Well, I'll try to get some of the girls to change their name. But
okay. In the meantime, tell us about this plant.
This plant, it's a native, which yours is not. So mine is a New England aster, which named I'm not quite sure why, because it seems to be native to pretty much everywhere this side of the Rocky Mountains. So I think it peters out like in Montana and like its native range. But anyways, it's a New England aster. It's native, so it has the wonderful benefits of being native, and it's interaction with insects and pollinators. So that said, it gets to be about 3 to 4 feet tall. And I went out and just checked. It's raining out, and I had my umbrella out, and I just went and checked. Mine's about 4 feet tall, and it's about 4 years in. Full sun to partial shade. And let's talk about the flowers, because it's all about the flowers. Because this is a coarse looking plant throughout most of the year. Like you don't want to look at this. You want to plant it behind something, so those 3 and 4 feet can rise above. Something in front of it covering over. Its unsightly stems.
It's not ugly. It's just
it's not ugly.
I feel
it's not. No one would grow it for its foliage or habit.
Yeah.
You grow it for its fall flowers, which are these little red things. maybe about 1 inch wide, with red, that just had the briefest thought about turning pink.
Yes, it's like
That's a
more of
shade
a
of red.
magenta.
Not even. It's like thinking about that, but it can't quite make it. Like, it did its big toe in the pink magenta thing, but basically red. And it has yellow centers, if you can see them, because the little petals on the little flowers, which are maybe like 1 inch, they curl in, so it can be hard to see. But there's a gazillion of them on the plant, so it really has like this little, effect of there being like little red dots everywhere, and it's really cool. It's kind of the only red flower, like really red flower, that I have in my garden. I'm trying to think, but like I really like it, and I picked this up as it was a rescue plant. Nursery was going out of business. They're known for their woody plants, so I was picking up some cheapo woodies, and then the perennial section they had. Just these really sad looking asters for $1. And, it's just like a little white plant tag with a handwritten thing that said Alma Potchki on it. I'm like, I know that one. For $1, I'll take a chance. So I bought 2 of them, and planted them in the garden. And they've done really well despite my neglect and the neglect of their previous owners. And so I have it planted where it should look good with some little blue stem. So around the same time that it's coming in, this aster is coming into its own with its red flowers, the little blue stem, is getting those red, tawny, highlights to it, and that steely blue, and they should look great together. Except right when that is supposed to happen is when the blue stem flops all over the place and falls down, and shows the bare, ugly legs of the aster.
So it's laid out. It looks like it's got a skirt.
Not even, it's like the aster's skirt fell to the floor, and all you're seeing are like the bony knees, of this plant. It's an oh my moment. And this aster will flop too. Does your aster flop?
No. But I don't think it has a chance to, because it uses that oak leaf hydrangea kind of as scaffolding.
Yeah, so. That's true with some of the plants that I'm saying. Like I have them planted where like they can't flop, and this one flops a little. It's supposed to flop less. It flops a little bit, and so what I did last year was I ran some twine around the base of the stems and through the hydrangea that's behind it. There's a big leaf hydrangea that has those woody stems to it, and I ran the twine through there so that the hydrangea could be holding it up, but it looked like I had just lashed it to the post, of a firing squad, like it was just waiting for its blindfold. It did not look right. So I kind of let it flop around, and it does okay. But just a wonderful native. It's covered in cool insects, nice pop of red in the fall, and like I said, and there's a zillion of them, and no care whatsoever.
Asters are pretty tough. They I guess they do get, especially if it's a very humid area, they do tend to get a little bit of powdery mildew if you don't have good air circulation. I've never seen that on the Tatarian aster. I don't know about your aster.
I checked.
Yeah.
None. And we had a humid summer.
We've had a really humid summer. Yeah.
So there was none. And I think I'm going to find out a little bit more about just how tough asters are, because I planted some more this like late spring, early summer. Like I chucked them in the ground, no mulch. And then we had a dry summer. We had a drought. Mm-hmm. And I really have not watered them at all.
I think they're pretty tough.
Yeah, I think I've walked around and I've seen them, they kind of like fell over and stood back up again. And so they're kind of, S-shaped. But I think we're really going to find out how tough they are. But I think they're going to enable me in my bad behavior of like not taking care of, it's an aster, I don't need to take care of it. And
just chuck it in somewhere.
Yeah, I'll probably wind up killing a lot more if I plant them. But asters, the good asters, are a must for anybody seeking to enliven me. I only said it to be mean.
All right, so we did. I feel like we started off the show with two very expected plants, let's say.
Oh, okay.
Well, asters, I feel like people would expect that. They were two very cool asters that, I don't feel are very well known, but that was expected, the asters. So I'm going to go in a direction that is unexpected. Are you ready for this?
Yes.
Brace yourself, Steve. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to go with resurrection lily, which is Lycoris squamageria, zones 5 to 9, more commonly known as resurrection lily. Some people confuse it with what's known as naked ladies, which is Amaryllis belladonna, and that's zone 7 to 11. That is a different plant, more suited to warmer climates. So everything that I'm about to say about the resurrection lily, if you live in Southern California, you can basically bet on naked ladies being the exact same behavior pattern as this resurrection lily.
The common name I always hear is naked ladies.
But that's a different plant.
No. Like even people talking about Lycoris call them naked ladies.
Oh yeah, different plant though. Resurrection lily is Lycoris, and that is something that we have in cooler zones 5 to 9, which I think I mentioned. But I recently got to visit. What's the matter, Steve?
What, we can grow those around here?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I've been missing out. Do continue.
Yeah. Okay, so here's my story about resurrection lily. So I recently got to go down and visit my family on the Connecticut shoreline, and my grandparents 5 decades ago bought a tiny little glorified fishing shack down there. And my grandmother was not a gardener. She was a great cook. She was a terrible gardener. And she never had really much luck with anything except many, many years ago, decades and decades and decades ago, before she passed away, she planted these bulbs. And it is always a surprise when they arrive in late summer, early fall. In spring, these resurrection lilies kind of come up with really thick bladed foliage. Think about daffodils that never bloom, a slightly thicker blade than that, but that's what they look like. And then that goes away and you think, well, that was nothing. Great. I'm glad I'm giving a lot of space to this terrible plant. And it goes away and you don't see anything. There's no trace of even the dead foliage for months. And then in late summer, early fall, these skyrocketing stems come up to be about 1.5 to 2 feet tall. They're pretty tall and they're completely bare, just stems. And they're topped with these really beautiful lilies that are light pink with a yellow throat to them. And they're really, really beautiful. I mean, they just stand out. Now, again, it's all about the siting, right? So these ones that are at this summer cottage that my grandmother planted 50 years ago are sticking out like sore thumbs in the middle of a foundation planting. So they look a little odd where they are, but it's so stunning. They have a slight fragrance to them, very, very light kind of sweet smell to them. And as I said, they're generally planted as a bulb, but it's a hardy bulb that comes back every year. And zones 5 to 9. We're in a zone 6 and probably a 6B down on the shore of Connecticut. So, speaking to the hardiness that you were talking about at the top here, they say zones 5 to 9 in a lot of online resources and in our AHS encyclopedia, but definitely zone 6. These guys are hardy too. And I just love those, memory plants, those things that bring up memories. So I see those flowers and I think of my grandmother every single time they come up. And it's a really sweet reminder. And unexpected color in fall. They continue blooming generally for about a month or so. The big explosion happens. You get all of those flowers, and then you'll get some spotty additional blooms that kind of sprinkle on through September. And if they're still blooming in October, it's pretty shocking, especially around here. But
did you describe the flowers? Like what the flowers?
I mean, I don't know how else to describe them other than they look like lilies. They look like a thinner version of an Oriental or an Asiatic lily.
They're kind of like trumpet shaped.
Yeah, trumpet shaped with like a dissected 5 different petals all the way.
Does it like curve back?
A little bit as they start to bloom out, that they do. Each petal kind of curves back a little bit more. And like I said, it's got a slight yellow throat to it with a little bit of the, the yellow anthers in the middle of it.
But it's maroon, right?
No, it's a light pink.
Light pink. Okay.
Yeah. Which you know how I feel about pink flowers, but I feel like I give it a pass in fall because it's so unexpected. It's not my favorite color, but just because it's something, it's very exciting.
So I was touring gardens in North Carolina in fall one year, and went to one garden, and but doink, there they are sticking up. Like, oh my gosh, that's like horse. It's one of those plants that I'd always seen in photos and never seen in real person. Like, oh, that's great. And then we went to another garden. Yes, it was like a 10-acre, property, and on these paths through the woods, and like everywhere you walk through the woods, there were just like little, things of like horse popping up here, popping up there, and it was just so wonderful to see.
That's interesting. Look,
there's more like horse. They were like they were wonderful. It was such a delight. It's the same joy of seeing spring bulbs popping up, but in fall. Like it's the same thing, and they're very striking, and they're tall enough to have a presence.
They are. They definitely are. I'm surprised. So I've only ever seen it at our family summer cottage in full sun, and everything online says full sun. But if you saw it along a wooded path, then that must mean that you can push them in at least into some dappled shade.
Yeah, but you don't know. I don't know if these things were planted like 50 years ago, when it was sunny, plants get established. It's why everybody thinks, mountain laurels are shade plants.
Yeah,
but they really would prefer full sun, but they grow in the woods because, they were established before the trees got tall, and the trees got tall and they're hanging in there, but
they adapted. They adapted. But this is definitely this is an old-fashioned plant, and just such an apt name, resurrection lily. Just when you thought that thing died from spring, and you're like, why do I have this? And then it comes back and resurrects itself to be really stunning in fall.
Yeah, so I'm totally gonna have to buy some now. I did not think that they were hardy around here, so I'm totally gonna get some. But you're making me jump ahead on my plant list again.
Oh, good.
Because we're talking about autumn bulbs, and it's true of I don't know all autumn bulbs, but they send up their foliage in spring, goes away, you forget. And then up come the flowers in fall. And so the one I want to talk about is autumn crocus.
So similar.
Yeah, colchicum species and cultivars. Any of them are great. There are actual crocuses that bloom in autumn, but this is called autumn crocus because it looks pretty much like a crocus. So I want to cast your memory back to the wonderful days of the 1980s when America was, under the spell of the, rough little rapscallion, well-meaning, guy by the name of Crocodile Dundee.
I remember this. I thought you were going to say, okay, so early 80s. I was like, I was one. But yes, I remember Crocodile Dundee.
Sure. And there's a famous scene from the movie. Some people may not have seen the movie Crocodile Dundee, in which they take a rough-edged sort of Australian cowboy from the bush and bring him to New York City for some reason. And so he's out on the wild streets of New York with his reporter friend. And they are approached by a mugger who takes out a switchblade, flicks it open, and says, give us your money. And she says, oh, my God, he's got a knife. And to which Crocodile Dundee says in an Australian accent, that's not a knife. This is a knife. And he takes out this massive Bowie knife. And so that, for some reason, that whole scene is what I think of when I see a colchicum. Because, that's not a crocus. This is a crocus. Because it looks, if you take your spring crocus and magnify it by like 4 or 5 times, I'm not going to use the phrase that you normally use.
I want to say it. On steroids. That's what she said.
Right. But that's what these things look like.
Yeah, they
do. And so like you get these teeny tiny little spring flowers that are cheery in spring. No, in fall, boom, there they
They're
are.
massive.
They're huge. They're like 6 to 10 inches. Like the stems get up to like 10 inches tall, and you get a nice sized flower from this thing. When we were like, if anybody wants to go back and listen to our episode where we were at Quack and Grass Nursery. Mm-hmm. That's where we were like walking around the back of something. I almost tripped over the giant section of these things, and that's where I first fell in love with the colchicum. Why am I not growing this? It's such an easy to grow plant. Not a bulb; it's a corm. For those of you who are keeping track at home, but it's like a giant crocus thing that comes up in fall.
Yeah.
Likes full sun, likes well drained soil. You can get various versions of it. Some are white, but they're usually in the purple, lilac, pink neighborhood. And they're super easy to grow. They're poisonous, so things do not eat them. They're not native to North America. They're native to Europe and I think Asia. But just a great fall bloom. Like it's stunning to have those kind of like spring pastel colors in fall when it's normally like, the rusty reds and the oranges and things like that. And you get this nice really pop of lavender or pink. It's really rewarding, and especially rewarding because you've basically done all your work already when you planted it, and that's one of the reasons why I love bulbs. But yeah, colchicum, any colchicum you can get is a good one.
I feel like the first time that this plant entered, my world and got onto my radar, I was up at the Berkshire Botanic Garden on a photo shoot many, many years ago for fine gardening. And there was this absolute massive, I don't know, I want to say it was probably 20 feet by 10 feet mass of ajuga. So, you've got this carpeted, dark, chocolatey colored ground cover, and through the middle of ajuga, which is a fairly aggressive and mat forming ground cover, were just pops of the colchicum, the pops of this autumn crocus. And it looked so cool because you had this giant quilt of chocolate and then bright pink crocuses just popping up through it. And I thought, oh, that's just a really cool combination. And that would be such a great plant for, I feel like, any ground cover to plant it, do an underplanting of that, or, kind of sneak it in those little corms. So you could have that, after the ajuga kind of does its thing in spring and blooms, and then it holds tough as a ground cover. Then in fall, it almost ends up looking like the ajuga bursts into bloom. And I thought, oh, that's a cool way of doing things. I got to do that. Haven't done it, but it's a cool thing to dream about. All right, so I've gone through 2 plants that I've grown, and we talked about those. So now I'm going to talk about a plant that I'm not growing, that I should be growing, and I fell in love with after basically editing a manuscript, Tough Yet Pretty, which was a recent article featured in Fine Gardening. Go online. It is now online. If you're become an all access member, you can reach this article for free. And it was by Julie Lane Gay. She wrote this article about plants that were just almost too delicate looking to be as tough as they are. And this plant that she wrote about and I fell in love with is wild swan anemone. And it's anemone, oh boy, here we go. Cultivar MACANE001.
Like why even bother?
Because I feel the obligation, if it's a trademarked plant, that I have to say this ridiculous actual cultivar name. But for all intents and purposes, this is wild, not white, wild swan anemone. And it's 1 to 2 feet tall and wide. It does a normal anemone, fall anemone kind of a growth habit. You get these really bright green, tightly packed palmate leaves that form a nice mound for most of the season. Pretty nondescript, not much going on. Not a very demanding plant, even moisture. Will tolerate some drought once established. Full sun to partial shade. I've had other anemones that I've had before kind of burn out in full sun. So partial shade, I would say, is really its wheelhouse. But then, so you got this tuft of green, and in late summer, early fall, it sends up these delicate stems shooting out. I hate to say like fireworks, but like bottle rockets out of that mound. And on the tops of it, you have these white half-dollar size star flowers that are beautifully delicate petals, petals, a yellow center. And then on the flip side of this wild swan anemone is blue, a bluey kind of indigo color. And gosh, I got to tell you, because of how they're situated on these tall, thin stems, the wind catches them and you're seeing white. No, you're seeing blue. No, you're seeing white or blue, and they flutter. I don't know if it's like a swan's wing and that's why they named it that, but it is spectacular and super, super beautiful. The one drawback that I did read about this plant is that it has a tendency to self-sow, so you will get baby anemone plants. To me, that's not a problem. I will, much like a hellebore, I will dig up those babies and put them in other places or just allow them to self-sow in place. It's not something that's aggressive. It's not something that's going to spread all over the place, but you will get babies. I also like the fact that this is a plant that is zones 4, 5 into 8. I saw a couple of gardens online that featured this plant that were in zone 4, and that's really cool to me that it'll go that low in a zone. But again, wild swan anemone, very delicate looking, very beautiful white, yellow, blue blooms that persist through September into October, so into mid-fall. So you're doing late summer into mid-fall, and just a really unexpected plant. It's on the top of my list for next season because I'm kind of enamored by it.
So you talked about memory plants, and bringing up anemones for me is I'm holding back tears because I grew anemone once, and it was honoring Joubert, also white, looked great, amazing plant, blooming wonderfully, and then one day the deer came along and ate it, and I've never grown anemone again. Like the hurt was just too much. Like it was, I'm so excited by this plant. I remember exactly where it was growing, which is unlike me. I remember exactly what it looked like, and I remember exactly how I felt the day I went out there and the deer had eaten the darn thing to the ground. I can't go through that hurt again. As wonderful as anemone are, like I can't do that. But here you are again, like messing with my plant list. So now I have to go with the one that looks like fireworks on my list, which is actually called fireworks goldenrod, which again, is a usual suspect for fall, but for a reason. It's that good of a plant. So it's Solidago rugosa, fireworks, zones 5 to 9. And this is a goldenrod whose it flowers all along the stems, and they kind of shoot out in different directions as though the firework had just popped and exploded and sent out its little thingamajigs in all directions. That's kind of what this thing looks like, but in that goldenrod yellow thing. So and a lot of solidagos do that. Members of this species will do that. So, different shapes and different flower shapes among goldenrod. But this one is special probably because it stays a little compact and doesn't spread as much as other goldenrods tend to do. Full sun to partial shade. I grow mine in partial shade. Deer proof. Rabbit proof. The rabbits I've seen them hopping around all around it, and they've never bothered this. Adored by pollinators, but more about 3 feet tall. I think I've read somewhere that it can get to be about 4 feet. Mine have only been about 3 feet tall, maybe 2 to 3 feet wide, but not a massive spread. It forms like a nice bulky clump. but it isn't thuggish. It's not like your aster. Um, so it forms a nice thing. I'm not. This is one that I'm not sure if it flops, because I have other native solidagos that do flop, but this is planted behind a boxwood, and in front of a stone wall, so it kind of doesn't have the chance to flop.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a known flopper, but it's it's
A known flapper.
right. But the yellow in fall is just so wonderful. It's so cheery, in that fading light, of autumn, to see this bright pop of yellow, and to see like a butterfly come and land on it and do whatever they do to flowers. I think it wants wetter soil. I don't give it any
Really?
particular. I don't give it any particular spot. And it's supposed to be drought proof, and all of my
Yeah.
solidagos have come through the drought. But it's native to Eastern North America, like into like, I guess, like it touches on Eastern Texas. But it's the habitats, and I had to write this down. The species is indigenous to wet sandy prairies, swamps, marshes, gravelly seeps, low open woods, pine barrens, swampy meadows, thickets, bogs, moist sand dunes. Yeah, so there's a lot of and rocky cliffs or bluffs and abandoned fields. So
All right. So
I think
that's like the gamut. It's like it grows in full standing water all the way to a rock outcropping. I mean,
but you can see how
it's
moisture
adaptable.
does not bother it. But
Mm.
like, I think if you planted it in like full sand xeric, you know, rock garden, it might not be the happiest thing. But if you have a wetter spot, it's not going to mind that. It might actually
Yeah.
enjoy that. But fireworks goldenrod ultimately it's a classic for a reason.
So, it's still throwing me off the conditions that it wants because when you see native stands of Solidago, goldenrods, just driving around in the Northeast, typically where you see them is on the side of a highway in, really, really gravelly soil. And the only Solidagos that I have on my property are actually just native ones that have,
But
pre-existed me.
they're different species.
Different, maybe,
Yeah. So rugosa comes from these areas, but different solidago come from different conditions.
what is, I don't know because and then my neighbor has Solidago planted in like well-drained, bright sunlight, gravelly backfill from her foundation. So I don't know. I in my experience, I just tend to think that they're very adaptable plants, which is a great thing, to be able to put them in almost, it seems like any condition and they do well.
Yeah. So moisture is not a problem for these.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Just to reiterate your point again.
Well, also the whole full sun thing. I had some rugosa as a canadensis, I believe is the species. I cut back. I have a really dry shade area where I had this clumping bamboo growing, and I cut back the clumping because it was too big of a clump. But it's basically underneath a maple tree, in between the maple tree and the house, and does not get a lot of sun. And what popped up there, in the absence of this bamboo, was this solidago. So it's dry shade, and boom, it popped up, and it looks great, and made it through the drought again. No trouble. So
Crazy.
yeah,
Crazy.
and again, so native looks good. Pollinators love it. Easy to grow.
Looks
What
a
more
little
could you ask?
weedy. Looks a little weedy, but that's all right.
Well, yeah. So you kind of hide it behind something.
All right. So my last plant comes as no shocker to anybody, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Caryopteris, Bluebeard, blue mist. It is the ultimate fall bloomer. I mean, it is. Stop rolling your eyes, Steve.
Well, I think you should disclose right now that you're getting paid by the Caryopteris marketing group to mention this plant pretty much every episode.
I'm not. I'm not. I mean, anybody who's tuned into any other episode probably has heard me recommend a Caryopteris of some flavor.
And they just took a drink because Danielle said Caryopteris, take a drink,
Or they're skipping 15 seconds. Don't skip. I promise. I'll make it worth your while. So Caryopteris, come on now. It's deer proof. It's rabbit proof. It's drought proof. It's a woody subshrub. You can cut it all the way back. You can forget to prune it. It's just a really tough shrub. It likes full sun. It doesn't require any kind of, fertile soil. It thrives in lean soil. I'm just going to recommend Caryopteris as a group, SPP and CVS, any species, any cultivars. It's zones 5 to 9. You like chartreuse foliage? Great. You can get Worcester gold. You can get sunshine blue. Great ones. You like gray foliage? Awesome. Go with dark night, which is, the standard. You like variegated foliage? Awesome. Go with snow fairy. That's a great variegated option for a cultivar. But bluebeards and blue mist shrubs, their claim to fame is as the temperatures start to cool down, these things burst into bloom with these blue spider-looking flowers, and regardless of the variety, they all bloom blue. I think there might be a pink and maybe a white version, but for the most part, what you're going to find out there is blue blossoms all over this shrub, starting in early fall, going through September, October, depending on where you live. It blooms for about 2 months. It's awesome, and it's so unexpected. Blue is not a color that is found often in the garden, so it's cool in that respect as well. And it's 2 to 3 feet tall and wide, almost universally throughout most of the cultivars that you'll find. Some get a little bigger, some will stay a little bit more compact, but this is just a great, great subshrub. The other cool thing about it that I don't think that I've mentioned before in the past is how easy it is to layer this plant. Almost like you didn't even try, which I haven't. So the branches touch the ground, and all of a sudden you'll see, there's roots coming off of that stem. I can chop off that part of that branch, and I've got a new plant, which is actually something that I did years ago for our publisher, Renee, at the Taunton Press. And we arrived at her house, and I handed over this stick in a pot, basically. And I remember heading out that day and my husband going, "You cannot bring that to your boss as a gift. Like, you will be fired for sure." But she planted this thing, and it's absolutely, this was many years ago. She sent me a photo the other day. We'll post it online. It's gorgeous. It is absolutely gorgeous. I believe that one was Worcester gold. So it's this beautiful chartreuse foliage that has developed into a 2x3 shrub that's going to get covered in blue blossoms in just another couple weeks here. It's an awesome plant. It's an awesome plant. What do you got to say about my fabulous blue mist bluebeard shrub?
Nothing I haven't said before. No, I mean, you do such a good job recommending them. I always think like, I really should get some of those. I failed with them many years ago. I don't think it was my fault. I blame the plant, of course. But
they don't like standing water. So I will say that. So if you've got an area that's not well drained, then they're not going to do well.
Yeah. Anywho, I might have cut them back too far, but they just sort of gradually disappeared on me. But they do sound like great shrubs, and I wonder why I'm not growing them. I wonder why you don't write an article for Fine Gardening about Caryopteris. You seem to know quite a bit about them. I mean, seriously. I mean,
All right.
You know all the varieties.
I'll put it on my to-do list.
Well, if only you knew someone there who could take care of that for you. Yeah, no, great shrub. And it has absolutely nothing to do with the plant that I'm going to talk about because all your other plants, let into mine. But mine is a last minute addition. I wasn't planning on talking about this plant until this morning when I thought about I needed to post something on the Let's Argue About Plants Instagram page, which if you're not following out there, you probably should. From time to time, we post some neato photos of some cool plants. Sorry for all the slang. But so I thought I should post something, and I went and looked at probably the last photo I'd taken on my phone, and it was of ginger love fountain grass, which is Pennisetum alopecuroides, zone 6 to 9, and it's ginger love, and it looks amazing, the photo, because I'm such a great photographer. But actually, the plant looks really good too. And it's one of my favorites because most of the pennisetums of the alopecuroides kind of look the same, and they differ like from height and size. And Modri has a darker flower; it's like a blacker flower. But ginger love has more of a maroon to red coloration on the flower, and it's hard to, you can't go through an entire episode talking about fall bloomers and not have one grass on there, because this is the season for grass and their flowers. So like we have to do some grass.
I guess I always feel like, oh, that isn't an actual flower, but it is a flower. But you don't think of it as that. You go like, oh, the plumes of grasses. And it's just like, oh, wait, is that the seeds? Is it a flower? It's kind of both. I feel like that's why we don't mention it.
Yeah. Well, I thought you were going to jump on the fact that I just said we have to do some grass, but we have to mention grass on the show.
It's never been that kind of podcast before, but I'm willing to give it a try.
Anyhow, ginger love, maroon inflorescences, plumes, whatever you want to call them. It's a full sun to partial shade. Mine doesn't get really much direct sun until like late afternoon. Then it gets whacked. And I really like where I've planted, because it has this maroon blooms to it. I have it planted right next to a physocarpus, like a smaller physocarpus.
Pretty.
I think it's petite plum. So it has a really deep maroon foliage, and they look great together. And that's kind of, if I have anything that's red, I plant that in that area, except for the aster, which I talked about earlier in the show, which is a completely different area. Probably because I forgot it was red when I planted it, or didn't know, because it's just this little stick. But it looks great with the physocarpus, and it's just a really striking grass. And it's this time of year when it really shows up. I've got it planted on a little corner by a pathway, and it's just there to greet you, kind of sticking its inflorescences out for you to brush by as you walk by with this wonderful maroon color to it. It's a small mound of foliage, I think 2 to 3 feet tall. And I said, well, that sounds weird. So I went out in the rain just before we did this show to look at it. And it's about 3 feet tall, with the arching things going above it. The blades are a little wider than my other Pennisetum alopecuroides, which are Hamon, which are the dwarf varieties. So again, it's a little beefier. It's not native, unfortunately, but it's the highlight of what's happening in my garden right now, which is it's late summer. It's practically Labor Day. And it's just great. I'm proud of it. I love it. I took 87 photos of it, backlit. I shot some video of it because, that's just how we roll these days. Yeah. Action shots of it, just if it's doing its thing and we're moving along. Yeah. It's really good.
Is that an intrinsic perennials?
Yes, it is. Intrinsic perennials, yeah.
Nice. Well, I mean, if so, that's intrinsic perennials is this very cool plant breeder and nursery out in Hebron, I think, Illinois, and they do such cool stuff with grasses. And actually, Brent Horvath, who runs that place, just did a recent article that'll be out around the same time that this comes out, this episode comes out, in Fine Gardening on medium-sized grasses. And
did he mention this one?
He did not, because he had a different Pennisetum on there called Yellow Ribbons, which the foliage is chartreuse. It from afar, in a photo, it looked a lot like, help me out now, a Caryopteris Bowles Golden. That's what it looked like. So, but it's a Pennisetum, so far tougher and really cool, but had apparently a really nice tinged red flower to it. So that's exciting. Yeah. I mean, if ginger love is coming out of intrinsic perennials, that's a winning plant, man. They do cool stuff out there with grasses.
And now, because everything sounds better with a British accent, here's Peter to talk about the meaning of fall.
As a metaphor, autumn is used to signify the end of something. The good days are gone, and things are slowly, quietly moving towards their inevitable end. But that isn't how fall feels to me. I consider this season a time of rejuvenation. I remember that working in the garden is a joy, rather than a sweaty form of torture. Mulch gets tossed around, yellow leaves get removed, fall bloomers take over, and the garden looks wonderful again. I can proudly don my orange Luton Town Football Club scarf, grab a cup of warm tea, and stroll the garden to greet my plants, as if they were dear friends I hadn't seen in a while. A new metaphor is in order, I think. Perhaps autumn should represent a second chance, a starting over, getting going again after enduring a rough time, even though tougher times might lie ahead. Fall is about perseverance and the triumph of our spirit. Winter might be coming, but we will enjoy our gardens up until the moment it does, and probably long thereafter.
You know, I'm glad, Danielle, and all that talk about fall, there was no mention of pumpkin spice.
I thought you loved pumpkin spice, or do you just love everything else from Dunkin' Donuts?
I like all the Spice Girls, but pumpkin spice was my least favorite.
That is not answering my question. All right, let's hope that we'll get some answers from our expert testimony. We've got Karen Beaty, actually, from Texas. And did you know that they have fall color in Texas? I didn't.
Sure.
All right, let's see what she's got to say.
Hi, this is Karen Beaty. I'm a horticulturist at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center in Austin, Texas. And I'd like to talk to you about a few good plants for fall color in Texas and in the Southern Plains region in general. I know that folks in more northern areas often think that Texas and the Southern Plains doesn't have good fall color, but the truth is that we get our fall color mostly in the form of blooms instead of fall foliage. So here are a few plants that make for great fall blooms. The first one is showy partridge pea, Caryopteris fasciculata, variety fasciculata. And this is a sweet little showy annual. It's an herbaceous annual in the legume family. It does well in USDA zones 3 through 9. And it has these yellow blooms that are about 1 inch across. And they're interesting because the 5 yellow petals are of unequal size and they have kind of an irregular shape. They're really attractive for bees and pollinators. The plant itself, if it's on the shorter end, if it's about 1 foot tall, they usually stand upright. But once they get to be about 2 or 3 feet tall, they tend to be kind of sprawling. They bloom from late summer, maybe July or August through October. And so they're a source of really reliable color in the heat of late summer and bringing us into early fall. They like to be grown in full sun. They can tolerate part shade, but they do need good drainage. They're very easily grown from seed, so if you want to have some fall color from this plant, you should sow the seeds in March through May. They make a great nectar source for bees and butterflies too. The second plant I'd like to mention is called Texas gayfeather, Texas blazing star, or just Liatris. It's Liatris punctata, variety mucronata, and this is a really amazing source of fall color. This plant is a perennial herbaceous plant, maybe 1 to 3 feet tall. It's kind of makes like a sprawling clump of these tall, stiff, unbranched stems. And the stems are covered in narrow leaves and also have these clusters of bright purple flowers that are really densely packed along these long spikes. So it stands out amongst other plants just for its color and its general form. It blooms from August through December, as late as December, but even after it stopped blooming, the blooms have some interest, even as the color starts to fade. So after the leaves have fallen, and if the blooms are looking spent, you can cut the whole spikes to the ground in late fall, and the corms underneath the ground will sprout again in the spring. This is a plant that requires really low water. It likes full sun, can take dry soil. It naturally tends to prefer like open fields and woods. And so because it does thrive in poor soil, you really don't need to fertilize it, and you don't have to give it much additional water, if any. The third plant I'd like to mention is actually a grass, and it's Gulf muhly, otherwise known as pink muhly, Muhlenbergia capillaris. And this is a really nice perennial grass. It's found throughout much of the U.S. It's good for USDA zones 5 through 9. And all year long, it has attractive foliage, making a clump about 1 to 3 feet wide and 1 to 3 feet tall. I've seen it be as big as maybe 4 feet in either direction if it's really happy. In addition to this attractive foliage, in October, it makes these really magnificent purplish pink clouds of fall flowers. So these flowers are really loose and smoky looking even. It looks like the blooms are kind of like hovering above the grass clump. And it's really outstanding. It looks gorgeous, especially in the morning, like at dawn and at dusk also, just with the light hitting it just right. This is a grass that can take sort of low or medium water in the soil. It likes full sun. It functions really well in meadow gardens, and it just makes a great general garden plant. It looks nice, grouped along edges. And it's really easy to grow. So I think it's a really nice one to include in the garden because it kind of holds space all year long, but in the fall it gives some really nice fall color. The last plant I'd like to talk about is American beautyberry, Calicarpa americana. And this is a really pretty understory perennial shrub. It's about 3 to 6 feet wide and tall. It thrives in USDA zones 5 through 10. And it's a really lovely understory plant. It has some really graceful arching branches. The foliage is kind of a yellowish green. But what really makes American beautyberry stand out is the fruits. So it blooms white or pink in early summer, like May, June, and July. But in the fall and in the winter, it has purple fruits on it, which look like berries that hug the branches at the leaf axils. And they're usually a deep purple. They can sometimes be white in some varieties. And they're just really different looking. The way they hug the stems instead of sort of hanging from the stems is really different. And even once the leaves have fallen off, the fruit tends to persist on the plant. So it really catches the eye. So this is a really pretty source of fall color. It does well in moister situations. So like moist woods, swamp edges, bottomlands. It can take low water, and it does prefer part shade, but it can also take sort of medium to moist soils. It can even take a hard pruning in the wintertime. If yours is getting a little bigger than you would like for the space you have, you can cut it to about 12 inches above the base each winter just to encourage it to have some more compact growth. But I really like this plant. It's easy to grow, and I just think the berries are so interesting, and they provide color at a really nice time in the season, especially once the leaves have fallen from the plant and you can just see the berries. So these 4 species are just a few of my favorite for fall color. We had showy partridge pea, Texas gayfeather, Gulf muhly, and American beautyberry. And I picked out these 4 in particular just because I think they represent a range of different colors and different forms that are all really great for providing good fall color in the garden.
Danielle, I think I really agree and really like what Planty Spice had to say there.
That was not Planty Spice. That was Karen Beaty. And it was pretty interesting to hear that they do, in fact, get fall color in Texas. Wow, who knew? So New England, Texas, everywhere. This was a great episode, wasn't it?
I think so. Yes. Oh, yeah. Which was one of the best. You can't top 60, definitely.
Top 60.